Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today we're jumping into some malicious compliance. Before we start, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's completely free and you can always change your mind later. But if you stick around, you might find this channel is like an almanac that will help you get out of a lot of different situations. It's pretty cool. Alright, our first story today comes to us from Latteralus, Railroad Malicious Compliance. All aboard? Let's jump right in. The following I posted as a reply in a thread about railroad workers not being able to strike. Not very familiar with this subreddit, but hopefully you all enjoy. For reference, I am a US Federal Railroad Administration certified conductor and engineer who used to work for a major railroad, union, ending my career in 2018. We weren't allowed to strike, so instead of striking, we could and often did utilize the 40,000 plus rules that all contradict each other for some very sweet, malicious compliance. Story time. John is a great guy, never calls off, been with the company over 20 years. He knows his job well and often will take the time to train newer switchmen, brakemen, and conductors. He is very personable and just a generally easy guy to talk with. He was also our union rep for a long time until his wife became ill, so he resigned from those duties. One day, I heard a manager yelling at him because he was late to a scheduled train during what I would call a pretty major storm. This is the Pacific Northwest. Snow, hail, and rain coming down on very graded terrain. Manager tells him that when he gets to his destination, he is going to personally meet him there to counsel him. I hear John utter the words, "You'll be waiting a while." Now, to understand this piece of track, you have to understand it is very mountainous, and at a single point drops down to a single line of rail between two major intersections of track. Very busy, but due to the grade, only a single train can do it at once. This area is also very difficult to do maintenance on in good weather, since it requires essentially off-roading mountain roads with steep cliffs and areas that aren't otherwise easily manageable, nevertheless during this icy storm. John hops in his scheduled train takes off, my engineer walks in from outside, and had spoken with John beforehand. They were good friends, like Sunday barbecue with each other's families on the regular Friends. He tells me to put my paperwork down, that we aren't going to be going anywhere, kick my feet up, and enjoy getting paid for nothing all shift. A bit confused, he tells me to watch the line traffic monitor. Sure enough, John knew this choke point, set his train on it, blocking all transfers from most of the West Coast, at least the northern portion of the US, Portland, Seattle, and Canada, and stated that due to worsening weather, visibility, and safety, that he would not move the train until it was safe to do so. Hit his 12 on duty, then waited another 4 for a ride. I was sent home after 2 hours of waiting, but could monitor from a phone app and my laptop. I calculated his pay for all this, and the deadhead he had back to our station, and it was close to $1,000 day for him. None of us complained. We got paid regardless of the train status, and he was in fact following the company and the FRA's rules, which are very strict about safety. OP added a really somber edit at the end. It says, John passed away last year due to cancer, but that stretch of track is now referred to as John's Pass. Down in the comment section below, a user called CoderJoe1 asked OP, "Epic, any fallout?" OP responded with, "None, it's a safety issue. Company knows the FRA would start nailing their coffin if they tried to counsel or do anything about it. Company itself is also very big on safety, so it would harm them in the long term. John knew all of this and really stuck it to them in a place they had no recourse other than to wait, delay shipment, and get another crew the next day. If that next crew felt it was unsafe, they could also cite safety and sit there for their entire shift. Simple as." To add, John also gave the new crew overtime as they had to deadhead to the locomotive, so easily a 2-hour nap in the back of an SUV, easy money. John sounds like one of those guys who wouldn't take crap from anybody, especially somebody from higher up that's trying to make them do something that breaks the rules of the company they work for. Naming that pass after John is just the icing on the cake. It's a memorial that he definitely deserved. Our next story today comes to us from VenMarkus. How much malicious compliance can I pack into one job? maybe with some revenge? Only one way to find out. Let's jump right in. This had happened several years ago now. I was working in IT on a contract to hire basis for a company that likes to ship things. Standard 60-day to hire full-time contract. Another guy with the same deal started a week before me, relevant later. So we both put in our time and he gets converted to full-time. Cool, sounds good. I'll be real soon as well. But wouldn't you know it, between when he went full-time and me, there was a big management shakeup and they completely forgot to convert me to full-time. I brought this up several times and they first played it off as we'll get around to it, which then moved to you need to work harder to get converted. Well, that's not what I was promised when I started working. So I asked if I can start putting in overtime then, as there was a hard no for contractors allowed to do overtime. They told me I needed to work for free to show that I was willing to be converted. That's a no from me, dog. First thing I did as soon as I got out of the meeting was emailing my contractor company and explained everything that was going on. They would back me 100% that if I charged any overtime to them and the company I was contracted to didn't pay it, they would be sued out of existence. I also asked if I can just work my 40 hours a week and call it a day because I'm meeting what was technically in the contract. They said that is fine as well. So here started my malicious compliance with no overtime, no on-call, no extra effort. At 4 o'clock, the whole place could be on fire. I was nowhere to be found. I reached my hours for the day and week and was gone. So then we were all trained up on ITIL's practices and were supposed to follow them. I took care of third level support and an issue finally made it up to me. I fixed it and closed it out, sent it back to the help desk for them to call the customer and relay everything was fixed. This led to the help desk getting angry with me and complaining to my boss. So I thought we were doing ITILs, and first point of contact was to be the last point as well. He told me that no, we do not follow ITILs here, never mind the training we just did, I guess. So I did what I do best. From that point on, I never updated or closed a ticket that was put into my name. I think I had hundreds of tickets racked up in my queue. See, I actually completed the work, but would never touch the ticket. I mean, why would I have to? There were no standards we followed. So for my final act around the start of December, my boss pulled me into his office and told me I might not have a job at the start of the new year. I shrugged and said, okay. I remained quiet, but later that day, I set up an interview with my friend at another company. This went on for 3 weeks, never said anything to the boss, but I had signed an offer and was starting my new job after New Year's. Last day before break, I casually came into the office and debanned my laptop. We were supposed to save off important material and reformat laptops when someone left. Oh darn, I missed the first part. Maybe if there was an actual process? About that time, my now ex-boss quickly comes into the room flustered. I just got a call from the contracting company. They said you don't work here anymore. You said I wouldn't have a job at the end of the year, so I got a different one. But we should have talked about this. Oh my gosh, where are all your automation scripts you wrote? On my laptop, I told him as I stood up and walked out. A month or two later, one of our old coworkers had died and I went to the funeral. My old ex-boss was there and he couldn't even look me in the eye. I also heard the guy they hired to replace me was getting furious because he had to go through all my open tickets and every time the customer would tell him that it's already been fixed. I think something that management doesn't realize sometimes is that they need the worker more than the worker needs them. There's other factories, there's other jobs, there's many other things that person could be doing besides working in that role there. Places like this with management teams like I've just described, unfortunately, well, they still thrive because they're not just screwing the employees, they're usually screwing the customers too, and they make bank from it. Our next story today comes to us from kmcaulifflower. Karen demands I prove that I'm handicapped and immediately regrets it. Let's jump right in. For background, I, 20 female, have a genetic disorder called Ehlers-Danlos or EDS. Among other things, it causes my joints to be very weak, and so I have several subluxations, partial dislocations a day, mostly my shoulders, hips, and fingers. I would like to say that I do not recommend doing this. It caused me a lot of pain during and after this, I do not recommend hurting yourself to make a point to anyone. But I was feeling petty and was not in the mood to be talked to in that way. So I was being a good little patient and going to the store to get my medications. My aunt drove me to the store. I can't drive due to seizures and my EDS. So we pull into a handicapped parking spot. I hang up my disabled pass on the back mirror and hop out of the car. And behind us, a typical Karen minivan pulls up and we hear the screeching mating call of a Karen. Excuse me. I already know what's going to go down. My aunt seems annoyed, but I turn around with a smile. Hi, can I help you? In her nasally voice, she says, "You're not allowed to park there." I fake a confused look. Why not? She huffs loudly, "Because you're not handicapped. You look just fine." My aunt is about to go off, but I give her a look that says, "Let me handle this." I turn back to Karen and said, "Ma'am, I am handicapped, but it's not obvious." Before Karen spoke, I knew what she was going to say, and I started mentally preparing myself for what I was about to do. She smiles smugly and says, "Prove it." I try to explain that it's not safe to prove it, and I try to explain what I have, but she keeps demanding proof. I'm already exhausted, and her voice and attitude made it even worse and pissed me off. So I look her right in the eyes and grab my hip and pull it out of place with a sickening pop and crack. I smile to hide the look of pain on my face. I park close so stuff like this has a lower chance of happening. Karen looks like she's going to faint, vomit, or both. I then move my shoulder out of place with the same sickening pop and crack. Karen stumbles back, and the disgusted and fearful look in her eyes made it so worth it. Okay, I get it, stop, that's actually so gross. While dry heaving, she runs back into her car and speeds off. My aunt quickly helps me into the car so I can put them back in place. My aunt then leaves me in the car and gets my meds, but also gets me my favorite ice cream. After we get home, she gets me situated in bed where I eat my ice cream. My aunt says she's proud because I put Karen in her place, but to never do that again. 100% worth it, but also hurt a lot. And again, I do not recommend hurting yourself to make a point. OP added a really quick edit at the bottom. It says, "I'm doing well, and fortunately I recover from dislocations quickly, and I'm doing as well as I can be for my situation." Okay, this is honestly none of Karen's business. I don't know why OP would even go through popping a joint out to show Karen what the problem was. I think the only real way to deal with a situation like this is to look her right in the eyes, that Karen, look her right in the eyes and say, "Are you my doctor? No? Then mind your own fucking business." I don't curse very often here on KCC. I try to keep it as family friendly as possible, but a Karen like this just honestly pisses me off. This is the worst type of Karen. Our next story today comes to us from spoiltease. I need a degree to get promoted? Fine, I'll leave to go get one. Let's jump right in. While I was a college student in the 80s, I accepted a job as a second shift computer operator at a large regional bank. The job duties were processing all the checks and payments, printing statements and checks, running all the backups, and so on. On the day I showed up for the job, I learned that I wasn't getting that job, but a lower one, which physically loaded the check readers, loaded printer paper, signed checks, burst forms, and so on. The lead computer operator had apparently threatened to quit if they didn't promote internally and give the job to one of the current people in the position I just ended up in. They later got married, so you can probably figure out her actual motive. But the department manager, Mr. Biggs, my boss's boss, told me that I would be promoted to computer operator as soon as anyone left the position. You guessed it, 2 years later, no one has left the position, and we acquired another regional bank. Our CEO told the CEO of the acquired bank that no employees would be fired. So, suddenly, we had an extra computer operator on every shift. But Mr. Biggs insisted I'd still get promoted because he knew I was the most computer literate employee he had, something he used to his advantage in numerous side projects, which should have been paid at a much higher rate. 6 months later, one of the computer operators finally transferred to the programming department. I asked Mr. Biggs to promote me to the position, and he told me he was working on it. A few months later, he finally tells me that they still have too many computer operators because of the acquisition, and I wouldn't be promoted until more of them left. Clearly, this wasn't working. So a few months later, another position opens in the programming department, and I apply for it. Mr. Big signed the form, allowing me to apply, and wished me luck. The interviews went well, and programming wanted to hire me, but a few days later, the computer operator who transferred there told me, privately, that Mr. Biggs went to the head of programming and asked him not to consider me for the position because I was his best employee, and he couldn't afford to lose me. The head of programming told him, "No, I'm gonna hire the best person for the job." The next morning, the HR director calls me to say that one of the executive vice presidents wants to interview me for the position. She's flabbergasted because he's never asked to interview anyone of that level and couldn't explain why he wanted to now. After the interview, the HR director called me, apologized profusely, and told me they were giving the position to another candidate because he had a college degree. No, it wasn't related to the position in any way. The degree was from an unaccredited college which had actually asked me to teach computer courses there, which I'd turned down. Of course, I knew what had really happened, so I told the HR director that I hadn't realized how important a degree was, and that I would immediately switch to part-time instead of full-time so I could take more hours of classes to finish my degree more quickly. There are no part-time positions in Mr. Big's department, so it meant transferring to the department run by his biggest competitor within the company. She transferred me immediately at the same pay I was making in the previous department, and I never worked for Mr. Biggs again. Ah yes, another important thing to learn about the corporate world: if you are irreplaceable, you're also unpromotable. In this situation, I'm not sure how OP would even get out of that other than finding another job somewhere else, because they don't have the authority to bring somebody else on and make sure that that somebody else knows how to do their job. So there's not a big gaping hole if they move up to a different position in the company. It's just a no-win situation for OP in that case, unless they leave the company and move to greener pastures. Check out all 4 OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.